What are the things that are really needed to establish and begin perpetuating a new Buddhist organism in the frontier lands? That's what this episode is all about. When it comes down to it, the idea of establishing a new Buddhist organism to serve those outside of the sphere of influence of the mainline Buddhist infrastructure and in lands where there may be practitioners, but they don't have the ability to perpetuate their tradition, comes down to some very simple things. It's a very straightforward, technical piece, but it requires bravery. It requires people who are willing to go against the grain a little bit, who are willing to be considered mavericks in the tradition. In all new Buddhist organisms, the people that have initiated them have been considered mavericks to a degree. Shinryu Suzuki very much came from the mainline Soto Zen, but what he did was a little bit unorthodox in terms of a Soto Shu structure. People didn't say a tremendous amount because he did his best to sort of bring forward those relevant aspects of Japanese Soto Shu. But in Japan, one of the things that's very interesting that not a lot of Americans realize is that Soto Shu does not consider American Zen schools like that comes out of the San Francisco Zen Center exactly Soto Zen. There are subtle differences. Training is different, the services are different, etc. That doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it bad. But it is new. And it is a bit of a maverick move in the Zen world. Over time, as things perpetuate and grow and become established and matured, initial, what could you say, hesitancy about establishing such new communities gives way to grudging respect, which then gives way into just it being another form of Buddhist practice that one might engage in. As I mentioned in a previous video, Thich Nhat Hanh, when he established the Order of Interbeing in February of 1966, caught the ire of the more established mainstream Buddhist temple-oriented Zen. He wasn't even a teacher when he ordained the first 6 in Zen. He was a full monk, of course, and was well on his way to being a teacher, but he hadn't received Lamp transmission or Dharma transmission. That wouldn't come for months ahead, actually. It was May of 1966. But even regardless of that point, he caught the ire of many in the Buddhist community for creating a structure that was sort of outside of the mainstream. He was very brave. Thai was very brave in how he approached this and how he established a new twig on the branch of Buddhism. This is the same anywhere. Anytime that there is something new that is new to the establishment, there's a lot of angst that comes with it. There can be a lot of animosity if people are very jealous about the system that they belong to. This I have discovered as well. And so we need to recognize the bravery that is involved. As I mentioned in video 2, when St. Patrick went to establish a new Christian tradition in Ireland, he was very frowned upon. He received any great number of dismissals, any great number of, sort of spittings in the eye, if it will. And so the first characteristic, if one is going to move forward with establishing a new branch, organism, however you want to call it, off of the Buddhist tradition to serve in the wilderness, to serve the frontier lands, that is going to be a sense of bravery. It will take that. What is needed in practicing and setting up such a system is a few different things. When I have raised this matter with other people before, one of the key features, the first features that is mentioned, and quite rightly so, is that it can't be something so totally new that it is a whole different set of teachings other than what the Buddha taught. Any new tradition that can call itself Buddhist has to be linked in somehow to the roots of Buddhism, and that is, through ordination, receiving the precepts on a practical level. But in terms of teaching, it can't be something that contradicts the Buddhist teachings. It can't be schismatic. It can't be anything that causes people to think that they have to be in opposition to old traditions and old schools of Buddhism. Quite the opposite. It must recognize itself as the younger sibling of a much older brother and pay respect to those traditions from whence it came, even if it is doing something a little bit different and going on its own pathway. That is very important. And so, first and foremost, any new Buddhist tradition must respect the tradition that came before it, must be in some way linked to the tradition that came before it, and must establish authentic Buddhist practice. And what do I mean by that? It's the teachings that have been passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation, from the Buddha, from the sutras, from the precepts, from the Abhidharma, the commentary, the teachings of great teachers down through the ages. It can't be separate from that. It cannot be dismissive of that. It must incorporate those somehow. So a strong practice and an authentic Buddhist community and tradition has to be the first leg of a stool. If we're building a stool, it has to have 3 legs, and that's the first. It has to be linked into the tradition, it must be respectful of the tradition, and it must be authentic Buddhist practice. Some may disagree what this is, and that is, even today, amongst the various traditions of Buddhism, people disagree about what the authentic Buddhist practice is. But if you look hard enough, you see that all Buddhist practice really does have certain roots that need to be maintained down through the ages, and that is essential. Second of all, any new organism that is establishing itself has to have a mechanism to train, to bring in new people and to teach them how to sit, teach them how to do walking meditation, eating meditation, teach them the basic teachings. So there has to be a mechanism by which those teachings can be perpetuated in an authentic and genuine way. It may not be perfect, but it needs to be a way where the teachings can actually be conveyed. And so that's very important. There needs to be some sort of training schema so that new people will learn not only the tradition, but whatever comes with this new organism, this new organization, this new whatever it is you want to call it, tradition, school, what have you. Those are just names. Whatever the elements of this new twig on the branch will be, there needs to be a process to introduce people as to what the shape and form of that looks like in relation to the tradition. And finally, and I think this is going to come as no surprise because it's been a major topic in the other videos that I've done on this subject, there has to be a mechanism for somebody to come in to be able to ordain others so that those people can ordain others and have enough skill to be able to teach others, to guide others in the practice, etc. This is essential. And it is what is lacking in so many Buddhist practice groups, as beautiful as they are throughout the frontier or wilderness lands. They don't have the ability to ordain people. They don't have the ability to perpetuate themselves. And so this is a third essential leg on the stool, is that has to be something that comes with this. They have to be able to ordain others into the tradition and to help those people become good teachers of the Buddha way. It must happen. That must be how it is. In the previous video, I talked about how Patrick basically converted and ordained somebody in 20 minutes. I think we can do a little bit better than that in this day and age. But there has to be a mechanism to do that in any new tradition. Because without that, as I discussed in the first video, most practice groups will be there for a generation and then die out afterwards because they have no method of perpetuating themselves. These are three key elements. First and foremost, there needs to be a Patrick or a group of Patricks. If you looked at the second video on this, you'll know what I'm saying. Patrick, who was born in a Christian environment and whose uncle was a priest and his father was a deacon, and he was raised in the Christian tradition, was later abducted, sent to Ireland as a slave, returned to Britain, I think about 10 years later, was ordained a bishop. He received ordination as a bishop and immediately turned around and went back to Ireland against the best advice of all the other bishops and clergy of the area, that he was wasting his time, he was wasting his energy, and he was kind of, spitting in the eye of the tradition to go evangelize those barbarians. But he did it. And all it took was one person. It took one person who had the capability in the existing tradition to light the touch paper to start that new tradition. And in this case, what will be needed if this tradition is going to get off the ground is it's going to need somebody who's brave enough, or a few people who are brave enough, to bestow the precepts based on whatever this new organism looks like in tradition, which includes being able to eventually ordain others. That's going to be a requirement. Otherwise, all of this is academic. All of this comes off the table because there is no connection to the root tradition and no means to perpetuate anything from the Buddha way down. That is a key feature. There has to be somebody who is willing to sort of guide, supervise a little bit, but guide, offer advice, but ordain others. That's going to be needed. And without that, none of this can come to pass. So there needs to be a Patrick. Such a new tradition needs its new Patrick. For myself, this has been a project that has been on my mind for half a decade, and I've practiced in Soto Zen and the Plum Village tradition. And even if I were to become part of something new like this organism, my intention is I will not leave the Plum Village tradition, and I still will respectfully read and practice when I can in the Soto tradition. This is not meant to replace, because especially the Plum Village tradition has done so much. It has done so much to bring Buddhism to the West. But this is sort of the organism that I'm talking about is sort of the obvious next step. In the Charter of the Order of Interbeing, there's a sentence that Thich Nhat Hanh wrote that new Buddhist schools are necessary that speak to the local life of Buddhist communities in order for it to authentically perpetuate. People have rendered different opinions on what he meant by that. Certainly it applied to the Plum Village tradition because that's exactly what he did. He established a new Buddhist school to bring new life to the Buddhist teaching and to bring those teachings in a way that was authentic and made sense to the people in various lands, particularly in the West. This organism isn't a replacement for the Plum Village tradition or any other tradition. Quite the contrary, it is reliant on those traditions and encourage that people practice in those traditions and learn about those traditions. This is an added piece. The idea is not to replace anything. It is to take what Tai said, and others too, for that matter. There are other teachers in other Buddhist traditions that were just as keen as Tai that Buddhism should adapt itself from culture to culture to culture to develop over time. That respect needs to be there, and that training needs to be there. But what Tai said, I take to heart. And I do believe that, as prolific and wonderful as the Plum Village tradition has been and is, we can do a little bit more. And we can do a little bit more in local communities in a way that is faithful to the teachings, but also provides a new way of expressing Buddhist practice in local areas that are frankly underserved, even by the Plum Village tradition. That's what this is about. This is not about schism. This is not about breaking away or creating something really even that's new. It's about taking what is received, paying respect, being authentic to it, but now unfolding the flower in a new direction, growing a new twig off the twig. That's what this is about. And so it must be in that spirit that a new organism or tradition is established. It cannot be contrary. It cannot fight old traditions. It cannot hive itself off from the root. It cannot do these things. It must endure. It must endure scorn. It must endure the guffaw. It must endure those who are lineage jealous, or school jealous, or tradition jealous, and embrace those people as brothers and sisters, not hive ourselves off from them, to incorporate their wisdom into a new container. And that must be the spirit. And anything less than that, and it won't be a Buddhist tradition. And to boot, this tradition, this organism, must allow for the incorporation of other local spiritual traditions. As Celtic Christianity did, frankly, as the Plum Village tradition in Buddhism did, as different Thai Buddhism did, there is an incorporation of local indigenous spiritual perspectives that fit within the Buddhist framework to create that new organism. That includes, in lands with people with ancestry like such as myself, that includes entering into lands, that have been heavily Christian or heavily indigenous, allowing for the incorporation of certain practices that will fit into an authentic Buddhist practice. That's what Celtic Christianity did, as we discussed in the second video. It did not suppress and it did not seek to supplant old traditions. It was in dialogue with it, and it incorporated relevant elements into the practice in a way that was respectful and enhanced the Buddhist practice. That is an essential element. We can talk about structures, we can talk about this, that, and the other thing, and we will. There will be an episode on establishing a quote-unquote wilderness monastic rule, a charter, if you will, as to what might be incorporated. But many of the elements that we've talked about in this video and others will be incorporated into that. It must be the case. And so I guess I conclude this is the third and final video in this particular series with a call and a challenge to people in existing Buddhist traditions who are the patriarchs, that are the bishops or the people who are capable of ordaining. If you feel that there is merit to this, that it is a worthwhile experiment, which is what Buddhism is. Buddhism is just direct experimentation with the Buddha way. Nothing more, nothing less. If you think this is a worthwhile experiment to come forward in, please contact me, Aaron Roth. I'm on Instagram, I'm on email, I'm on Facebook. And if you are willing to be the patriarch or the group of patriarchs that can get this thing off the ground, or at least give it a try, please let me know. There's no guarantee of success with this. Thich Nhat Hanh actually created 2 or 3 schools of Buddhism before he established the Order of Interbeing that were failures. They did not work. Others have tried new schools of Buddhism that did not work. Others have tried new schools of Buddhism that were incredibly successful. This is all an experiment. And that is the spirit in which we must do and go forward in this. but it's a worthwhile experiment because the teachings of the Buddha way, the great tradition that has come down for 2,600 years, is worthy of being perpetuated in the wilderness. Thank you very much, everybody.